Hey, what is up, people? This is Johnny and welcome to another Pokemon Theory. And today's Pokemon Theory is Mew's failed clones. So in today's theory we're gonna talk about failed Mew clones. And yes, I'm talking about Ditto, sort of. Now I'm going to read an explanation of this theory. Pokemon breeding used to work largely like animal breeding. Pokemon babies would be a hybrid of both its parents, but Pokemon would largely stick with their species. And mutations in natural selection would differentiate species over time. Mew is a mutant Pokemon. Like many mutants, it's sterile. But it had an ability like no other. It could transform into other Pokemon. This would earn its reputation in antiquity as the most powerful Pokemon. Whoever could get their hands on a Mew would have the world at their mercy. Somewhere along the way, however, the fact it's transforming made it powerful was lost. The misconception that it had superior psychic powers instead began to dominate. Scientists many years later discovered DNA in a sample of Mew. In an effort to harness the power of the legendary Pokemon, Team Rocket stole the sample and attempted to clone it. The cloning was done at an industrial scale, but the experiments were all laughable failures of Pokemon, most of which wouldn't survive outside of the incubator, to the point where they would just automatically discarding Pokemon that didn't resemble what Mew was meant to look like. Some of these discards, however, were successful in their own way. Indeed, it was quite common for the experiments to generate a certain type of Pokemon, one that had Mew's transforming ability but also fertile when it transformed. They were all born looking like failed versions of Mew, but they all adapted a natural form that was more suitable for its survival. These would become known as the Ditto. This overwhelmed the Pokemon world very quickly. Pokemon will find ideal mating partners in Ditto, and no other Pokemon could compete with the perfect matches. Ditto would transform into as far as breeding Pokemon went, and Pokemon that previously weren't breeding were finding partners. It could even breed some sterile Pokemon and some inanimated objects. Like, for example, Voltorb is actually a successful spring of a Pokeball, which could have been mixed with a Ditto, if you look at it some way. I have no idea. While largely unnoticed, over the course of few generations, Pokemon that hadn't bred Ditto had entirely died out, with the exception of the legendaries. When Pokemon's DNAs were sequenced, every last chromosome was impacted by Ditto. Thus, all Pokemon were matching up to the most notorious DNA, the Mew DNA. They mutated. I don't know what I'm talking about. This would lead scientists to believe that Mew was the first Pokemon, even though it made a little sense to put there when looking at the evolutionary tree. It's just a branch off of the Pokemon, okay? Also, Pokemon will not always take a form of its mother, and this is because the innate tendency how to transform that happens before the Pokemon learns its moves and what is during the development in the egg. Because the mothers could breed with other Pokemon species, this still produces a correct looking offspring. It became much more common in the Pokemon world. It would be many years before Team Rocket would be successful clone of Mewtwo, shortly before the events of Red, Blue, and Yellow and the anime. That had allied the strength of the legends of Mew. However, its most profound effect on the Pokemon had already happened long before. Mew wasn't the first Pokemon, but Mew DNA is present in Ditto, which bred extremely successful with all known Pokemon. So all known Pokemon have Mew DNA present in them. So yes, so if I can simplify this whole paragraph and talk about what do I mean by Mew being the DNA of all Pokemon. Well, basically Pokemons existed before there was a Mew, actually, or Ditto. They existed. So many people believe that Mew was the first Pokemon, which may not necessarily be true. Mew was just a Pokemon that had been cloned or made from the lab, or brought back to life, like fossils, I believe, or some way like that. And Mew was just a clone, so its failed clone was actually the Dittos. and they made these Dittos go into the public. They probably did release a lot of them, of Dittos, because this was an experiment. Usually in experiments many things could go wrong. And so what happened is that all these Dittos DNA started mixing with the real Pokemon, because the real Pokemon, as you can see in the game, Dittos can mix in with almost any type of Pokemon and allow it to have its own form of Pokemon. Like in the game, well, in the side of games, I haven't seen any I haven't seen any Ditto mating in the anime, but in the games, Ditto is a Pokemon. So many scientists find the DNA similar to Mew simply because all the modern Pokemon are related to the Mew's Dittos. So if you get the idea right there, it's kind of interesting if you look at it. So it means that Ditto was a failed experiment, and he started breeding with the majority of the Pokemon in the world, and this will lead to the conclusion that Arceus was still the Pokemon creator of all Pokemon, because that's what they say supposedly. So he's still the creator of all Pokemon, but Mew was the other clones have the DNA, and you know, I don't know, it works that way in the series. It's kind of weird. And as I mentioned, Voltorb, if you look at it, it could have been definitely a Ditto that made a Voltorb. Could have probably fused its DNA with a Ditto. So that's why Voltorb looks like a Pokeball, because it really does look like a Pokeball if you look at it. Maybe some Magneton or one of those Pokemon probably mixed in with him. I don't know, like some type of, you know, I don't know, needle, whatever they call him. I forgot what they call him. Well, anyways, that's what I'm talking about in this theory, and that pretty much sums up the theory of what I think that Mew may have breeded its way of all the Pokemon because of genetic pollution. Thanks for watching. So if you enjoyed this Pokemon theory, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section suggesting the next theory. Also, there are 2 boxes in the middle that you can go and click on if you wish to see previous video theories that you might be interesting or might find interesting at all. So make sure to click on those 2 boxes, and that will take you right to them.